Welcome to Biohacking with Brittany, the podcast where we explore cutting-edge health strategies, uncover holistic wellness hacks, and dive deep into the science of living your best life. I'm your host, Brittany Ford, a registered holistic nutritionist and biohacking enthusiast, here to bring you expert insights, personal experiments, and actionable tips to optimize your health, mind, and body. So let's dive in. Today's episode is all about perimenopause. This is something that I feel like is not discussed nearly enough in the health and wellness circles that we are in. I think there's a lot of talk about menopause, but not as much talk about the decade kind of before that. And we get into what that looks like, the signs and symptoms that are often missed during that time, what you can kind of do nutritionally and lifestyle wise to kind of like ease the transition, and how to really just thrive in that decade of your life. And on the show, I have Kucich with me. And so she kind of just goes through her personal journey and what we can do about this to balance hormones, support gut health, and why it's just this critical time that is not talked enough about. I love this. It's a very preventative, proactive approach, which I am all about in the, biohacking space. I feel like we're always forward thinking like that. And so I really appreciated this conversation with Ali and learned a lot, actually. Definitely learned a lot from it. Before we get started, a shout out to Qualia. Qualia makes some of the best supplements on the market for very specific things. And for example, I love their senolytic product. So this is something that works on the process of senescence in the cells, which is basically cellular turnover. And why does this matter to you? This matters because the more efficient your cells are, the better you're going to feel, the better you're going to look, and the more energy you are going to have, especially as we get older. So the senescence process is one of the 12 hallmarks of aging, and they created this product called Qualia Senolytic that fights that and helps actually support that turnover, I guess, in the body is a better way to put it. So I love taking this. You take it once a month for a couple of days, and it really just boosts the cells. It has things like fisetin in it, quercetin, all of these ingredients that have kind of been in the biohacking space for quite a while that are becoming more mainstream. Definitely check that out from Qualia. You can use my discount code and my link and you will save a ton. I really suggest it. It's like the best way to save money. And it will be linked in my show notes and on my website. It's also in my link in my bio on my Instagram as well, if that's helpful. I don't know. I hope that's helpful. It's my Instagram's at biohackingbrittany. If you don't follow me, please check me out over there. And yeah, enjoy this episode all about perimenopause. Share it with a friend if you want. Leave a review. I appreciate everything that you say and all the 5-star reviews and the 1-star reviews. Not that there's really many, but I read all of them, and it means a lot that you take time out of your busy lives to do that. Enjoy this episode. Let me know what you think, and I will catch you soon for another one. Welcome to another episode of Biohacking with Brittany. I am thrilled that you're joining me today. We are going to be diving into a topic that impacts so many women, yet often gets misunderstood, which is perimenopause. Even I feel like what I know about it is honestly kind of cloudy information. Like I don't feel super crystal clear on it. And joining me is the incredible Kucich Brady. She is a functional nutritionist and creator of Project Perimenopause. Ali is on a mission to help women over 40 decode their bodies, address the root causes of frustrating symptoms, and regain their sense of well-being through personalized nutrition and lifestyle strategies. So we're going to talk all about perimenopause, the symptoms and signs associated with it, how to make a smoother transition into menopause, tips for kind of like thriving in that decade of your life. So if you are experiencing any of this or know somebody is, this is the perfect episode for you. So Ali, welcome to the show.
Hi, Brittany. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you. Yeah, I am glad you are here and joining us. And like I typically start my episodes, before we dive into like the strategies and the tips and everything like that, can you kind of share a bit about your personal journey and what inspired you to kind of start this Project Perimenopause?
Sure. So out of college and graduate school, I embarked on a different career. And found that while I was working on Wall Street and doing all of the things, I felt terrible. I had a lot of, health struggles and just didn't feel well. And doctors told me I was fine, but I really wasn't. A lot of times people who end up in my field have had their own health journeys. So in my early 20s, straight out of grad school, I embarked on a personal health journey to try to figure out how I could feel better without taking a ton of medications and all of these, approaches that were being thrown at me and layered on top of each other. And I realized by changing my nutrition, my lifestyle, the way I exercised, all of these things, that I was able to basically control all of these symptoms that weren't a disease as much as they were just kind of nagging problems, right? I was sluggish. I had low energy. I had some weight gain. My skin was breaking out. I had headaches. And I realized through diet and exercise changes, I was able to control that. So that sort of put me on my path to where I am now. This is, 20 years ago about. And I went back to school for health supportive cooking. I became a health supportive chef and started a baby food business. And then I realized there was only so much I could do with that. So I went back to school for nutrition. And although there's a lot to learn from nutrition science, it still is really stuck in the old model of what the government tells you is, how you should be eating and you should follow that, right? Like every woman should have 40% carbohydrates. Every woman should have this, food additives are fine, all of these things. And I realized that since I had changed my own nutrition by not using these things, I realized some of those things were not accurate. So I began to pursue integrative health and integrative nutrition. And I found a couple of different, Institute for Functional Medicine, Functional Nutrition Alliance, Nutritional Therapy Association. And I went through all of their programs to become a holistic nutritionist. So as a holistic nutritionist, I'm able to and a functional nutritionist, I'm able to look at things through a much broader lens, through a root cause type of lens. And as I was doing that, I realized, wow, the people that I'm seeing as clients and all of my friends and all the people that tend to have or be more affected by their health are women. And women are juggling all the pieces. So, we're working, we're raising families, we're dealing with our parents. There's a lot of moving things that we tend to take on. And when we do that, or when we say women can have it all, because we can, but it always comes at a cost. It comes at the cost of our own well-being. So I accepted that I don't accept, but I came to realize that women are the great underserved. We can have the best lives possible, but we're still juggling. We have all these balls in the air. And so it became my mission to help support women, because I feel like we are incredible and amazing and can be very empowered. But a lot of us end up, especially in midlife, feeling unbelievably deflated. And as though our purpose is basically to serve everybody else and really never refilling the tank. So it became my vocation to help women fill their tanks.
Yeah, I love that. And I can totally see that, especially after I just had my first baby about 4 or 5 months ago. And thank you. And I could only imagine having multiple and them being older, and then myself being older, also juggling a career and kids and being in this time where, your health is changing so much, but there's not as much time to prioritize it. And then it kind of becomes like, put on the back burner and you'll deal with it later. And then I think that's kind of where these symptoms kind of pop up, and women, I'm assuming, and kind of from what I've heard, might just wake up one day and be like, wow, how did this happen? How did I suddenly, gain this type of weight? Or, my skin looks like this, or my hormones are all over the place, whereas in reality, it's actually been building for years and years. And then you suddenly just start noticing it one day is kind of what I think probably happens.
Yes. So if you're thinking about perimenopause, now I want to be clear that perimenopause, we're right now in what I call the menopause gold rush. That all of a sudden people have caught on to the fact that this is a topic that should be discussed. And then all the counterparts have learned that this is a topic that should be exploited. So right now you see it everywhere. You see memes and you see products targeted at women going through perimenopause. And you see celebrity activists and celebrities saying, well, not me, or this happened to me. So now I created my own skincare line, and somebody has their vitamin line, and somebody's written a book, and somebody's on, a very famous popular podcast. And all of a sudden they have 8 million followers on TikTok. And you're still watching this wondering, like, where do I as a regular typical woman fit into this whole thing? And what's missed is this initial discussion, this understanding of what is going to happen to our bodies. So when we're going through puberty, or when kids are going through puberty, our parents are told ahead of time, be prepared. We're going to learn about this in school. We're going to start talking about these topics. And you know that puberty doesn't come on just one day and last for 1 year and go away. It's this continuum. And we know from the time a kid is 10 until the time, depending on whether they're a boy or girl, it's going to go on for a good 10 years, depending. And they're going to show certain signs along the way, right? So I have 4 teenage boys. I have a 13-year-old. I know that he's technically in puberty, but he hasn't hit the point where he has like facial hair and chest hair and he's got a deep voice. That's coming. And I need to be prepared for that. And so I know when he starts exhibiting certain symptoms, how to look out for them and how to handle them and how to deal with them. Usually with teenagers, it's a lot of moodiness, right? Also, but so for women, we have not been given that information. So I want to say that perimenopause, which sounds like a very scary word, is about a decade. For some women, it's about 7 years. For some women, it could be more. It could be 12. It could be 14. But it's a journey and it's a continuum. It's a time period. It's not like you're here or you aren't, as much as this is a period of what I want to describe it as is market instability. You are coming upon a decade of roller coaster hormones, and it isn't linear. So you can't just say, okay, phase 1, this happens. Phase 2, this happens. Phase 3, this happens, and follow along, because everyone's body is different. So it starts for some women as around 37 and for some women around 40, but it's coming for you between the end of your 30s and your early 40s. And it's coming for everyone, right? I mean, we are going to estimate by the year 2030, there will be 1.2 billion women who are either perimenopausal or postmenopausal. That's a huge part of our population. But yet the term perimenopause didn't even exist until the 90s. It was just like it was just this kind of purgatory that women were in, and they had symptoms and everybody poo-pooed them, and you just learned to deal with it. Right. So our mother's generations were like, oh, I don't know. I didn't really give it that much thought. But then they start thinking, oh yeah, I did have hot flashes. No, I did have joint pain and I stopped sleeping. And if you think about it, but they weren't ever told that these are symptoms that you don't have to have. And that's what's coming about now with some of this information is you don't have to live with these symptoms. Anyone born with a uterus and ovaries is going to go through menopause at some point in time. And so you're going to experience either the physical symptoms or just the internal problems that come with losing your sex hormones. Everyone's going to have this happen to them. It's going to happen at different rates, and it's going to happen with different symptoms, and therefore require tailored or curated approaches. But it's going to happen to everyone, and it would be way better if women were more prepared, just knowing it was down the pipeline. So when the symptoms started, when they started in late 30s, early 40s, you could identify them then and take action then versus waiting until you were 5 or 6 years in. And as you were saying, really felt bad and really were noticing changes. So I feel like education and empowerment is the first step.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of what I did understand about perimenopause from, the limited content that I've read and consumed is like, it can be this decade before menopause hits. And I don't think it's something that is talked about super mainstream, at least in the circles that I'm in, of understanding that this shift is happening before menopause. I think there is so much talk about menopause itself, but that is later on and not necessarily the years leading up to it. Something that I was just thinking about when you're describing it is, and I don't know if you've seen this with your clients, is with the shift of women having kids later in life, how does that kind of play into perimenopause? Because there's a lot of women who won't start having kids until their late 30s or even early 40s. Like I remember years ago, I was a nanny for a woman who had her first baby at 41. So how does that impact perimenopause? Like, does it just kind of delay it, or does it have no effect? Like, what do you think?
It really depends on the woman, because I've seen both things happen. It's more customary for what I've seen is that women tend to go kind of right into perimenopause. They tend to have about a year of their hormones kind of being in flux, which is very common for anybody postpartum. And then they sort of roll right into the perimenopause. Now, I've had a couple of clients who have delayed it and they haven't started any symptoms until they were later. I mean, I didn't have a client who started her symptoms until she was about 48. and she had had twins when she was about 42. So it does kind of vary, but I would definitely say if I'm tending towards one answer, it would be that you kind of roll right out of postpartum into your perimenopause symptoms. And remember that the symptoms are, you can look up, my friends and I have a joke because anything that happens to us, our joke is it perimenopause? Right? It's like, I have a hangnail. Is that perimenopause? I have a headache. I want to throw punch my husband. Is that perimenopause? Like, it's all these little things, because if you look up symptoms, you see that there's like 60 symptoms, right? One is like apathy. Like, I'm apathetic. Is that perimenopause? But they really start early. And some of the very early symptoms are very easy to miss. And so if there's science behind it, and in your show notes, I'm sure you'll include the link to my Perimenopause Relief Kit. I have a free 6-video masterclass that women can watch and learn. The first video is what's happening, and it gives you like a really thorough understanding of the perimenopause years. And then it goes into the different approaches and the different things that I would do to help fight the symptoms. So it's all there and makes it really easy for people. It has a little interactive workbook and such. But what I want to say, if we're talking about the really basic science of this, is what happens in perimenopause. And perimenopause is when the things happen. We talk a lot about menopause. Menopause is the end. Menopause is when there's nothing left in the tank. There's very few sex hormones, and it's kind of over. The tumultuous time when people talk about going through menopause is actually perimenopause. It's also called the menopausal transition. Menopause is like, it's empty. So perimenopause is this kind of back and forth. So it starts in our, again, late 30s, early 40s, depending, is what we call, it sounds terrible. It's basically ovarian failure. Our ovaries stop ovulating. They stop producing, viable eggs. And that happens. It doesn't just happen. It happens in fits and spurts. So the first thing that we lose is our progesterone. And progesterone, of our sex hormones, we have estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone as the primary ones that we're talking about here. Then we have follicle stimulating hormone and some of the others. But if we're talking about hormones, especially hormones that then end up needing to be replaced, we're looking at estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. And progesterone and estrogen are really the two things driving the bus here. I like to describe estrogen and progesterone as the Sweet Valley High twins. Did you read that series?
No.
Okay, well, there's one sister who was wild and crazy and one sister who was really bookish. And they were twins. And one would have to say to the other, like, all right, it's time to come home. We have curfew. And progesterone is that. Progesterone is the bookish sister and estrogen is the wild sister. So they need to be balanced, and they should always be balanced in a woman who's got healthy sex hormones. They're always at a ratio so that estrogen and progesterone balance each other out like two wheels on a bike. And when progesterone starts to wane, which is the first hormone that most people lose, starting late 30s, early 40s, estrogen becomes dominant and unchecked. And when that happens, you start to see a lot of symptoms. And so the sign, and the real beginning thing is women start to lose this progesterone. And when you do, progesterone is also our body's natural Xanax. So some of the first symptoms women start having, it's not weight gain, and it's not my skin is sagging, and it's not hot flashes. It's sleeplessness, waking up in the middle of the night, feeling more anxious, just things like that you might not identify as symptoms of anything. You might be thinking, oh, this is a product of what's going on in my life. And so a lot of women at that time say to the doctor, all of a sudden I'm so anxious. I'm going to kill my husband or my partner, and everything makes me tense. And often you'll find a doctor saying, okay, how about some Lexapro or some Xanax or something, versus saying, well, you're right around the age where you're starting to lose your progesterone. So why don't we take a look at that? And so right off the bat, most women aren't aware that they're losing this hormone, and that this hormone could be replaced either, by using supplements to help promote more of it, or through hormone replacement, which could bring you up to a state of normal, and you might not spiral into some of the other problems as a result. Because estrogen dominance is really where we start to see the meat of perimenopause, like the true, where we start to get into the weight gain and the missed periods and the heavy periods and skin changes and all of that. It's when estrogen goes unchecked because there's less progesterone. So if women just knew that that was a possibility and that was going to start happening, and it's going to happen to everyone, you're not going to avoid it, we can have targeted strategies in place to know that when this happens, we enact this.
Have you heard about senolytics yet? It's a class of ingredients discovered less than 10 years ago, and they're being called the biggest discovery of our time for promoting healthy aging and enhancing your physical prime. Your life goals in your career and beyond require productivity. Let's be honest. The aging process, however, is not our friend when it comes to endless energy and productivity. And that's why I use Qualia Senolytic. If someone had told me that there are science-backed ingredients that could help me feel 15 years younger in a matter of months, I would not have believed it until I tried this. As we age, everyone accumulates these senescent cells in our bodies. They're also kind of known as zombie cells. They are old and worn out and not serving a useful function for our health anymore, but they're taking up space and nutrients from our healthy cells. Much like getting rid of dead leaves off of a plant, Qualia Senolytic removes those worn out senescent cells to allow for the rest of them to thrive in the body. The best part is you actually only need to take it 2 days a month. When I have taken this, I've had higher energy levels. I have been more productive, felt more enthusiastic in life, and also had less aches and pains. So resist aging at the cellular level. Try Qualia Senolytic right now. Go to qualialife.com/Brittany for up to 50% off, which is wild. And use code Brittany at checkout for an additional 15% off. That's Qualia, spelled Qualia, life.com/Brittany for an extra 15% off of your purchase. Thanks to Qualia for sponsoring today's episode, and I will definitely be taking my share this month. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's fascinating to think about the cascade of symptoms and the signs that can come from, just one hormone being off. But it's such a key hormone that we need to talk more about and figure out how to balance. And I love that you kind of talk about this root cause approach almost to handling perimenopause in this way. So would you say that the root cause of the perimenopause symptoms is the hormonal imbalance? Or do you think you could go even further than that and say, okay, why are the hormones becoming unbalanced in the first place? Is it a result of what you're eating, your lifestyle, etc.?
That's a great question. And I would say there is some to that, because the choices you make definitely can exacerbate the problems. But no, the start is our bodies at a certain age stop ovulating. That's what's supposed to happen. We're supposed to not be fertile at a certain age anymore. And again, it can vary for women by a good 10 to 15 years, depending on what's happening in your body. Now, if you have more inflammation, if you have certain dysfunction, yes, you might cease to ovulate sooner, but generally it's just biological processes. And as you were talking about the hormones, we have over 100 hormones in our body. They do a lot of different things. And when we think about our sex hormones, a lot of women are trained to just think okay, menopause means I no longer have estrogen. It means I no longer have a period, and that's the end. And you miss the fact that estrogen is the most protective element in a woman's body. It's the hormone that protects the heart, the brain, the bones. And while it's proliferative and there are estrogen positive cancers, and there's even progesterone positive cancers and things that people can worry about with estrogen. Estrogen is the driving force behind our vitality for our entire adult life. And when we lose our estrogen, because our hormones don't exist in a vacuum, it does pull off our other hormones. So our sex hormones, our stress hormones, which is our adrenaline and cortisol, and our metabolic hormones, which is our thyroid and insulin, they all work together in a concert. So when the estrogen starts to fall off, or actually prior to that, when the progesterone starts to fall off, which tips the scales for estrogen, it throws everything out of whack. Picture like a marionette. You pull the string and the thing's all jacked up. That's what happens. So it's not just we slowly lose one piece and then we slowly lose another piece. This is how women can often feel oh my gosh, I went from feeling okay to being completely undone. And it is, as you called it, a cascade. It is a cascade. We call it a hormone cascade, where one thing tips the scales and then all the other pieces kind of go awry. And yes, at the root of this is we're not ovulating anymore. Or in perimenopause, we're ovulating in fits and spurts. So some months you will and some months you won't. Some months you might ovulate twice. And we don't really have a tremendous amount of control over that. That is our body's biological process. We do have control over what we do to mitigate the symptoms. And diet and lifestyle do play a huge role. If you're talking about how do I fix this issue? How do I fix this issue long term? What do I do to remedy the symptoms I have? About 70% of it is diet and lifestyle. And then there's supplements, and then there's hormone replacement. And I'm a huge advocate for hormone replacement for women who get to the point where they need it, right? You don't necessarily need it at 40, but you might need it at 48. You might need progesterone at 40 and not need anything else till you're later. Like it's very different for each woman. And I actually work with clients to go through these steps and sort of figure out where they belong, in which bucket they belong as we go through the process, because it isn't linear. But where I encourage people to start with is the low-hanging fruit that can help remedy some of the symptoms. And the other component to perimenopause have you noticed, and I know you just had a baby and all of that, but do you have friends who were like, I used to be able to drink and now I can't handle any alcohol?
Yes, for sure.
Okay. And you're like, why did that happen? Why was it fine? And then now. So that's a prime example of how our bodies shift kind of beyond our control. And some of that has to do with, as we go through this process, we lose an enzyme we stop producing an enzyme called alcohol dehydrogenase. And men produce more of it than women, but as we age, women produce less. And this is an enzyme that helps break alcohol down. So as women get older, they have a harder time breaking alcohol down, which leads to longer hangovers and terrible sleep and all of these pieces. But this is rooted in the menopausal transition. And part of it is the fact that the most important organ besides our sex organs when it comes to this phase of our life is our liver. And this is something a lot of women don't know. The liver is responsible for breaking down all of our toxins, so alcohol and anything recreational, and also anything we put on our skin and any medications we take and anything that's in the food we eat and in the water we drink and the air we breathe and all of that. But it is also responsible for producing the cholesterol that helps be the backbone for our hormones and for breaking down the hormone metabolites, which are the waste products or the byproducts of the hormones once they're used. So the liver is super important. And women who don't take care of their livers, and by that, I mean eating and drinking in a way that helps support liver function, those women tend to have way bigger symptoms. So if we're talking about like a route or a way to get to it, the number one thing is to focus on detoxifying your liver. And that's something that everybody can do. You don't have to buy a kit. It's not a juice fast or stuff. Like, it's really like, I like to talk to people about low-hanging fruit. Let's talk about the things that you can do that are realistic, that involve eating, because I'm a really big believer in eating real food and eating as much as you possibly can for well-being. I don't believe in deprivation or starvation diets or air fasts. And I'm someone who once did a 44-day juice cleanse. So I can tell you, yes, I was much younger. I had no supervision. When I was trying to figure out my health journey, I did it by myself. And that was when I realized like I made a lot of mistakes and I realized I felt better, but I also realized there was so much I didn't know, which is what sent me back to school.
Yeah. I feel like I'm just going to pause you there for a sec. I feel like you touched upon so many key elements here and so many things that I've experienced in kind of a different way, more with like my fertility journey. Actually was part of what I did to kind of clean up my act before trying to conceive was I completely removed alcohol for the reasons that you're talking about, to be able to balance my hormones, regulate my cycle, and not overload the liver, which would then not be able to, metabolize and create enough estrogen in the body, etc. So there is that aspect of alcohol impacting your hormones even before you get to perimenopause, is how it impacts your menstrual cycle, fertility, everything like that. And so I personally don't drink. I'm not drinking right now. I don't know if I'll go back to drinking, but I definitely have girlfriends and even men who I know who say exactly like you said, like, I can't drink as much anymore, or I'm drunk after one glass of wine. And, when I was a teenager or early 20s, I could drink a whole bottle to myself or whatever the comparison is. But you hear that narrative again and again in society of, now that I'm older, I can't drink as much, or I'm drunk more quickly, or I am more hungover. And you're exactly right of your liver is not functioning as it once was when it's metabolizing that toxic substance in our body.
Yes. And the other thing is that the liver, if you were to run a blood test on most people, it shows up that their liver enzymes are fine. So some people will say, well, my doctor said my liver's fine. And I said, yeah, but your liver's not diseased. It's not a matter of, you don't have a liver disease. You don't have cirrhosis, thankfully, or alcoholic fatty liver disease, or even non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. But the liver tends to store fat, and it also tends to become sluggish the same way. I equate it to like you're wearing a pair of high heels, and over time the heels start to wear down, and you can either replace the heels or you're not going to be comfortable on your feet. In order for the liver to work properly, you have to give it a little clean out. You always have detox organs. Our body's detoxifying 24 hours a day. But to make that process more efficient, or I talk about like an air conditioner filter, like when you change the filter, the dirty filter, and it's clean, the purifier works better. And that's what's important. And it's not hard to support your liver. And in fact, I recommend that perimenopausal and any woman who's on hormone replacement therapy does a liver detox 3 times a year. And it doesn't, again, it's not like drinking weird substances and starving and sweating and these things. It's really eating for detoxification. And to eat for detoxification, part of what it is taking out the foods that tend to cause more inflammation, that tend to make the liver more sluggish. And then the other part of it is giving it the things that help to support healthy blood flow and healthy tissue turnover and all of that. And so you do that kind of in tandem. I run a program called the Real Food Reset, which is a 2-week liver detox. And, people do it because they want to reset their body, but the science of it, the real, like, it's not a gut cleanse. The science of it is liver detoxification. The liver is also the most underrated organ when it comes to weight loss. And so a lot of times as people start to detoxify their livers, they also start to see that they lose some stored body fat, and they lose some cellulite, and they lose some of that bloat. And that's a lot of it's because their liver's just working and processing things more efficiently.
What do you think about bringing in a practice like using a sauna or a steam room or something more of like a lifestyle practice in order to support liver health, which would then support balancing hormones?
I am a fan of a lot of those things. It has to work for you. It can't leave you feeling drained or depleted. That's number one. A lot of times we think about these extreme biohacking ideas, extreme things or biohacking things, and think you have to go hardcore. Right? Perimenopause is a time when occasionally you have to step off the gas. So you need to be able to do things that are restorative for you and not full throttle, because when your hormones are destabilized, keep in mind that in addition to the sex hormones, we throw off our stress hormones. When our sex hormones start to falter, our stress hormones start to falter. And our stress hormones tend to be what makes us feel miserable when our adrenals are out of whack. And people call it adrenal fatigue, but it's not that it's adrenal fatigue. It's really adrenal dysfunction. And when we're not supporting our stress hormones properly by going full throttle, we just end up more imbalanced. So I love the sauna. I enjoy a steam room. I think a sauna is great. I think a lot of those practices are wonderful if your body can handle it. So for me, I loved a hot room until I was about 45. And then leaving a hot room, I started to get a headache. I realized, okay, maybe I shouldn't be sitting in a sauna right now while I'm getting a headache and suffering through it. And then I was able to make sure that my water had more electrolytes, make sure that I got better sleep, make sure that things were happening. And then I was like, okay, I can go sit in a sauna, but I can only go in for 20 minutes. I can't go in for 40 minutes anymore. Like there were things that I realized my body could or couldn't do. I think it's really important to access your detox channels. And if your detox channels are blocked, I'm a big fan of lymphatic drainage in addition to that. And I'm fine with any type of those things where you promote sweating or you promote that, provided it doesn't cause you undue stress. And when we think about stress, a lot of times we just think about emotional stress, right? We think about like our job, our families, our spouses, or whatever, all of those pieces, but we forget that the body also feels stress when we stress it, when we physically stress it by some of these biohacking techniques, by exercise, by some of these things. And if you're not, or by fasting, a lot of women are like, what do you think about fasting? And I'm like, I think fasting is great if your hormones are balanced. If your hormones are imbalanced, fasting is going to backfire. And so the journey through the menopausal transition, which is, perimenopause into menopause, you might find that in the beginning, something works for you and a couple of years later, it doesn't. And you have to change course and pivot, and then you pivot back. So that's where I keep saying it's not linear. You can't really adopt one perimenopause strategy with the exception of eating. But all these other strategies, you have to sort of be resilient and be able to say like, all right, so this isn't working for me now. How am I going to adapt? So my hardcore workouts when I was 40 are now I walk 4 to 5 miles a day, and I strength train way more than I did before. I'm a child of the 90s. So for me, it was cardio, cardio, cardio. And I love cardio. I love to sweat. To me, it doesn't feel like a workout unless I'm dripping in sweat and I'm exhausted. But that doesn't work for me anymore.
I love that. And what I'm hearing honestly come through from this is like this idea of tapping into your body and listening to yourself and tapping into your intuition. Because it's like you said, like there are so many different cleanses or biohacks or modalities or things that we can do to kind of optimize our health. But it doesn't mean that it's actually going to work for you every single day, every single period of your life. So I think there's something to be said about like picking and choosing what works for you. And if you're sitting in the sauna and you have a headache, it's not working for you. And that's okay. It's okay. And it's okay that everyone is promoting it, but it's not working for you right now. And it's same even with like ice baths, which I've talked about a few times, is like cold therapy is fantastic, but a lot of the time it can be too stressful if you're doing it frequently for women. Like it's too stressful on the body. And that's okay. Like it's okay to take a little bit of it and leave the rest. And I want that to be more part of like the women's wellness discussions in general is let's tap into how this is actually making our bodies and our mental health and our spiritual, emotional health, how it's making us feel, and take only what is serving us in that moment.
I think that's really important, especially in the world of social media where we can see what tons of people are doing, right? And any given day, and I know your feed is curated based on the things that you tend to look up, but any given day I pop onto my feed and I see all manner of women doing all sorts of things, right? Like I only eat air, and someone's like, I only drink juice. And then someone's like, I take a cold plunge every single day and I run up and down a mountain. And there's all these things, and I call it like, it's kind of like the should generation. We see this and we're like, I have so many clients who sit down and say, well, I know I should be running up a mountain, and I know I should be cold plunging, and I know I should be doing this. And I'm like, you shouldn't, just because we see it, in this gold rush of people trying to promote and sell things. Just because you see that does not mean that that is what you should be doing. You should be listening to your body. You should at the very, like, if we're talking about like, what should all people do that is non-negotiable? Well, you should be eating regularly and eating to balance your blood sugar. And that's a whole topic. You should be drinking water every day. 70% of women are underhydrated. And when we're underhydrated, our nutrients don't travel to our body. You should be eating in a way that gives you both B vitamins and magnesium, because we need that for hormones, we need it for detox, and we need it to build muscle. You should be sleeping. There's almost apart from water, there's almost nothing more important than sleep. And like, if these things are not optimized, if your food, your sleep, your stress levels, your hydration, if those very basic, simple, low hanging fruit, things, these roots are not optimized, then you can be taking cold plunges, and you can be sitting in a sauna, and you can be running up a mountain, and you can be, swallowing fistfuls of supplements, and it's not going to make a difference. And that's what I think sometimes people are like, oh, if I start cold plunging, then I won't have to worry about all these other pieces. But that's not true. Like it's like in school, like with math, right? If you don't have the fundamentals, you're not going to be able to take calculus one day. And the fundamentals when it comes to this are really, really important. Like you need a sturdy structure, and the sturdy structure is nutrition, lifestyle, all of these enhancements first.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And I've experienced this kind of in my own way with trying to make everything work and fit. If there's someone listening to this who says, okay, I agree. I see the value. I understand this, but they're kind of overwhelmed, right? Like you're talking a lot about like hanging fruit, which is great. But what about the woman who's like you, I have 4 kids. I'm running around. Yes, I have these symptoms, but I don't have the time to dive deep into them. I don't know where to start. Like, what can they actually do today? Like, what type of habit? Like, what's the first habit that you would say is like, okay, this is going to move the needle the most? let's start with this one thing and then we'll build from there?
That's a great question. So as a busy mom, I'm a busy working mom. I have 4 teenage boys and I'm all over the place all the time. And so I like to say, if I can figure this out, you can do it too. So it's doable, but I like people to move in small increments, right? That whole idea of being 1% better every day. When I have a session with a client, especially an initial session, and we talk through all these things, I acknowledge like this can be extremely overwhelming. So the goal is to be consistent, to have your head in the game and want to make change. And then we're going to move the needle slowly, starting with nutrition, hydration, movement. So wake up in the morning, the first thing that goes in your body is a glass of water. It would be better if it was a glass of water with a pinch of sea salt to help remineralize after sleeping. And start with that. Start with just having a glass of water before your coffee every day. And then step 2 is like, okay, when we're eating, no woman should be skipping breakfast. Do not skip breakfast. Eat breakfast. Breakfast should be protein rich. And then I'll work with my clients on what should that breakfast look like? Okay, let's get breakfast down. All right. Another habit that we don't want grazing ever. Grazing spikes, it causes blood sugar imbalance and it causes fat storage. So then we start to realize, okay, we're not going to graze throughout the day. We're not going to grab our kids' crusts because we haven't had time for a meal. And we move through slowly like that. It's not just like, here's your meal plan. Here's your everything. Good luck to you. Peace out. I do individual sessions, a lot of, one-on-one individual initial sessions with clients. It lasts about 90 minutes. We go through a full medical history and then we go through kind of all the overview, like the macro steps. And then we start to, over the weeks we work together, we start to break it down into the smaller pieces, the chunks that people can handle. And we're building upon habits. So as we've shifted like, okay, now I'm hydrated more. Now I'm sleeping better. Now I'm optimizing. We like to optimize things one at a time so that it's not like, oh, here's the 800 things you have to do to get there. And so my approach is to start often with nutrition because it's the thing you can control in your house. Before you start on, and I believe in supplements, I believe in hormone replacement, I believe in all of that, but can you get 10,000 steps a day? Can you eat 4 meals a day and not have any snacks? Can you drink half your weight in ounces of water? Can you do these things that are, they're simple, but that doesn't always mean they're easy to accomplish when you're busy.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think they're simple, but it's hard to be consistent with them day in and day out. And even I find that myself, like drinking water before coffee, like today, I didn't do that. And so it's just like remembering to do these things day in and day out and the consistency, but the results really do come from the consistency. That's the thing. It's like same with working out, same with anything, right? Is like, yeah, you can do a workout or yeah, you can get 10,000 steps in one day. But if you're doing it every single day, for a month and you're walking outside in nature, getting some sunshine every single day for a month, then you're really, really moving the needle in your health and you're really going to notice a difference versus like just doing it one off. So that's the key is like taking these fundamentals. Yeah, they're easy, but they're not easy to do every single day.
Right. Consistency and compliance are the two the two biggest hurdles that a lot of women face. And sometimes when things don't move fast enough, and to be honest, in this phase of life, when our body is basically predisposed to store more fat than ever before, and our body breaks muscle down faster than ever before, like these things are happening. It will happen to all women at this time. When these things are happening and it feels a little bit like pushing a boulder up a hill, a lot of women throw in the towel again and again versus saying, okay, this is a journey and I'm going to be on this journey for years. And my goal is occasionally it's just treading water and occasionally it's making progress, but it's not going backwards. And to commit to that, like I'll say about 30% of my clients really dig in and are super compliant all the time and, have their head in the game and they don't step on the scale every day. And they know we talk about the science of what's happening inside the body versus, in addition to what's happening like just physically and like from an outward appearance. And those are the most successful women.
Yep. I agree. I think there is a shift as well. And even I've noticed this with myself already is like when I was in my 20s and younger, all of the healthy decisions that I was making, a lot of it had to do with like looking a certain way and aesthetics. And then once you start to get older, there's this it's just your motivation changes of like, okay, I want to be healthy because I want to show up now for my kids. I want to be healthy because I need to show up for my business and my job. And I want to reduce my symptoms of perimenopause. And I want to go through menopause in a more smoother way, right? So like you said, I think there is that transition that happens, but obviously aesthetics as well are still, are still great and very motivating because you could physically see the changes. But I do think it's kind of beautiful actually for women. Like there's this more underlying, deeper kind of motivation, at least that I've experiencing myself. I'm not sure if you've experienced that, but that's kind of what I've seen. Yeah.
The other thing that I want to point out, and this can sound scary, but when we lose our hormones over this period, it's not just like you might have an occasional client will say to me, well, my mother had no symptoms. She had no hot flashes and she didn't gain any weight. And those are the two things that people think about really. When you think about menopause, you think about what have we heard? We've heard hot flashes and we've heard weight gain, but there's so many other things. And my mother didn't have these things, but now she's 70 and she had a heart attack and she has osteoporosis. And maybe she's the beginnings of dementia. And those are the things that are happening on the inside when we lose our sex hormones that aren't talked about when we talk about the external. So estrogen, when I said before, it's the most protective, one of the most protective elements we have in our body. Estrogen protects the heart, the brain, and the bones. And so that's why heart disease is the leading killer of women over 50. That's why osteoporosis tends to set in when we're older. It's not because you didn't drink enough milk when you were 20. Because you've lost your estrogen, and estrogen is a protector in terms of bone health. Same thing with cognition and brain fog and memory loss. So when we're 30, we're not thinking about, will I have dementia when I'm 60 or 70, or will I have osteoporosis? But those things there's like insidious things are working behind the scenes with the loss of hormones. So if you know at 30 to 40, well, every day when I take my omega-3s, I'm helping to, prevent inflammation. I'm helping to support my brain. I'm helping to do these things that I might not see for 20 to 30 years, but I'm helping to prevent the onset of those problems. When I'm using magnesium and I'm eating properly and I'm eating for bone health and I'm strength training, it's not all about, do my muscles look great in my shorts or my bathing suit? It's also, am I helping to prevent bone loss when I'm older? So some of it is this mindset now of, okay, the things that happen in our 50s, 60s, 70s, we're really bringing about in our 30s and 40s. So yes, everybody still wants to look good. And it's amazing that at later ages now, 50 is a youthful age and women don't look old. And my mother used to have these friends and they'd all sit together at the beach in the summer. And I used to call them the old ladies. Like in my head, they were the old ladies. They wore like big one-piece bathing suits and floppy hats, whatever. And it turns out they were like late 40s. Like when you think about it, they all have like fluffy hair. And now I'm like, wow, like we've really come a long way in terms of our youth and vitality. But that said, we can do the things now to not promote it in the future as well. So we can look great, but we can also, part of this responsibility that we have to ourselves is ensuring that the next 30 or 40 years of our lives are also good, that we're healthy for our kids and our grandkids, and that we have a quality of life. Because our body, we have figured out how to have a lifespan that can, like, let's say, stretch up to 100. But our health span doesn't go to 100. And for women, part of that is this loss of hormones. So if we know how to handle it, we can prolong our health span. We can have, healthy brains and healthy bones and prevent heart disease versus all of those things that tend to happen when we don't pay attention to ourselves. So the physical is great, but the internal, the external versus the internal is so much more important at this stage.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I completely agree. And I think I hear those narratives in the different circles that I'm in. Even when I think about my mom and kind of like what she's been through. Yeah, you can kind of just see that playing out over and over again. And I like that you said like 50s is like youthful. I think that's funny. And I don't know if you've ever seen, there's a meme going around of like what people used to look like in their 50s versus what people look like in their 50s today. And it's like so different. Or like how they used to cast people in those age ranges in movies. And now everyone looks like so much younger, which is great. Like it is a good thing. And obviously we're trying to increase our health span, not just our lifespan, which is a whole nother discussion. But I think the fundamentals that you're talking about are really what does that. Like, yeah, you can take the supplements, these longevity supplements now, or, these hormones, bioidentical hormones. But if you don't have the fundamentals at play, like, it's really not going to do as much for your longevity or your health span. And those are the same things. The same things that you do for your health span are the same things that you can actually do to optimize perimenopause.
Yes. Yeah. Because perimenopause and the menopausal transition is really what dictates our health span. Like, how we go through this process will determine what our adult future looks like in terms of our health.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really good point. So if listeners want to work with you or learn more about your work, I know you did talk about one of your programs, but where can they find you and how can they access you and talk to you further about this if they have questions?
So the easiest way is by going online and typing in perimenopausereliefkit.com. So on perimenopausereliefkit.com, I have this free 6-video masterclass and interactive workbook. And the videos are short. These aren't hour-long videos that you have to, they're really quick. The first one's longer and then the other ones are shorter. There's a way to schedule a free consult with me from that page, from perimenopausereliefkit.com. There's a way to schedule a free 20-minute consult where we can talk because, again, everybody's a little bit different. And then I am running a Real Food Reset, which I run 3 times a year as a guided program. And then some women can also do them themselves as like a DIY kind of evergreen program. But where I give you support and guidance, the next one starts mid-January. And then it rolls right into a program that I run called Own Your Hormones, which is an 8-week group program helping women, cover these topics. And we work through these topics together in small groups. And then I also see clients privately and do the one-on-one thing. I call it the Blueprint program. And that's for women who don't want to work in a group, have limited time, want more one-on-one support. I try to tailor my offerings to what women need and to be flexible. So I have group, I have one-on-ones. But perimenopausereliefkit.com is really the easiest and best source. There's also a 3-day kickstart. So if you want to get started right away, you can scroll through the workbook. It lists a bunch of supplements that I like, as well as this sort of 3-day eating kickstart that you can do to give yourself a boost and then return to it, at any time. But that's a great way to do it. And I'm sure some of my contact information will be in your show notes.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I will link that all in the show notes and on my website so people can find you very easily. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast today, Allie. This was great. And I feel like you really did clear up some confusion about perimenopause and also just give us so many good tips of like what we can do to optimize that time in our lives.
That's great. I'm so happy to be here, Brittany. And I really want to impress upon people that this is a really big journey. Like doing anything for a decade, it's a really long journey. So there's a lot of information. There's a lot to cover. There's myths to dispel, and nutrition, lifestyle, supplementation, exercise, low-hanging fruit, and big pieces. But then the other piece is like, am I ready for hormone replacement? Like, what do I need to know? What kind of doctor should I seek out? What types of hormones are there? How much will that work for me? What supplements should I be using? Like, all of those are other pieces that are, maybe a little bit further down the line, depending on the age of your listeners. But those are also really important pieces. And so this is a big conversation that obviously can't be covered in just the scope of one session. But I'm hopeful that all your listeners realize that this is something that should be thought of. You should think about this phase of your life and think about how it can work for you. And then also think about what you want it to look like, what you want your future to look like, and realize that it's all attainable and all achievable. It's never too late. It doesn't matter if you're 39 or 49. You can still make changes to impact your health down the road and to make this journey better for you. And there are people like me out there to help support that.
Exactly. Yeah, I love that. And I totally agree. Great. Well, thank you so much. And I will, again, put this in the show notes and website so people can learn more, because I definitely think there's going to be people who reach out and just need support for this time in their lives.
Well, I'm your girl. I'm very happy to help.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Biohacking with Brittany. If you're interested in finding the show notes or the sponsors for this episode, you can do so on my website, which is biohackingbrittany.com. Remember to follow me on Instagram where I'm most active. My handle is @biohackingbrittany. And if you're interested in working together and you want to email me directly, you can do that. My email is info@biohackingbrittany.com. And I look forward to hearing from you and having you tune in next week.